Welcome to Making Money with Your Proofing System, a webinar covering 5 steps, tips, and tricks to converting your proofing system over into a display graphics printer. As with all of our webinars, you can follow us live on Twitter using the hashtag validation as you see on the screen in front of you. As I said, the title of the webinar may have been a little bit misleading. Probably a more appropriate title, although perhaps a little bit too long to advertise as a webinar, is putting display graphics on your existing aqueous inkjet printer. When we talk about display graphics, what we're talking about are things like banners, signs, retail point-of-purchase displays, window signs, things of that nature. We're talking about printing that on an aqueous inkjet printer that you may already have in your facility. The first question you may ask is, well, why do I want to do this? Why is this something that can make me money? Can it really make me money? What we've observed as we go out into the field and work with different customers is that many people have aqueous printers that are in great working condition that have unused capacity on them. These are printers that were originally purchased for proofing systems. Printing display graphics is a great way to make money off of that unused capacity that's just sitting in your facility. Many of us know that this is one of the few consistent growth markets left in printing today. This strategy also allows you to expand in what we like to call horizontal markets. And what we mean by that is selling, not going out and trying to find new customers and sell them new products, but focusing on the existing customers and markets that you serve today already and offer them new services, perhaps that they don't look to you to purchase today. This is a web graphic that was posted in the last month on myprintresources.com. Is an online magazine that serves the franchise sign market. And what's significant about this is that this article stated that more people like you, people that are more into traditional printing or consider themselves more of a quick printer, are actually getting into display graphics and competing with the traditional franchise sign shops. And the article was actually really telling these business owners to focus on their strengths. And so it talked about what are the strengths of these franchise sign businesses today, and it talked about which applications are the ones to really focus on and where they're making the most business. I thought what was interesting about this graph is that if you break it down, the segments in that graph that apply to aqueous inkjet printing, so products that can be made on an aqueous inkjet printer, banners, signs, and retail point of purchase, made up 25% of the product offering that those franchise sign shops right now are selling to their customers. So there's definitely opportunity for you to take an aqueous inkjet printer, produce banners, signs, what we're calling display graphics, and sell them to your current customer base today. So what are the steps? What would you have to do, or what are the things you should keep in mind as you look to take an aqueous inkjet printer that was purchased and initially used for proofing and turn it into a display graphic printer? First thing is, keep it simple. It is important to understand that there's really not much different between a proofing inkjet printer and a production inkjet printer. So to illustrate that, we thought we'd show you some differences between the two. So here's an Epson 7900. It's a very standard printer that many people would use for proofing today. And so here's your proofing system, and then here's your production system. So in case you didn't see that, here's your proofing system, and here's your production system. So obviously, all we did was we wheeled this printer out into a warehouse environment, and really we're trying to illustrate the point that there's really not much different between a proofing inkjet aqueous system and a production inkjet aqueous system. Really, there are 3 things that we're going to focus on that can take your proofing system and turn it into a production system for printing display graphic products. The first one is going to be media. That's a big one. We're using completely different media compared when we look at proofing versus display graphic printing. Layout is going to be something smaller, not as significant, but something you have to consider. And then finishing is going to be a really big thing that we have to focus on. It's probably the biggest obstacle to get into printing display graphic media on your aqueous inkjet printer that's originally designed for proofing. So let's talk about media. In the display graphic world, there are exponentially more sources for media compared to proofing, and the price ranges as widely as the brands. So you can find stuff for dirt cheap, you can find stuff for fairly high price, and the quality is going to vary with that. The validation media that Fine offers today was originally built as a proofing portfolio. And so we pride ourselves on our quality, our consistency, and our availability. One of the things we've built our business on is that ability to provide that consistency, the quality, and making sure it's always available in the field. One of the reasons we entered into the display graphic space is that we've experienced these horror stories that our customers have brought to us, where, for example, a customer gets a large job. They just get into display graphic printing. They get a large job. They print some samples. They send it off to the customer awards them this job, and what types of jobs do you typically get in display graphic printing? Much different than proofing. Proofing is simply usually just a one-off print. We're making one proof, we send it to the customer, they approve it, we print our job. In display graphics printing, the print off the inkjet printer is the actual end product. And so often when you get awarded a job, they need multiple copies. So, you know, you do a sample on some vinyl banner material, you send it off to the sales rep, they approve the job, and they say, great, I need 50 banners. Now you go to purchase the material that you need to fulfill the order, and you find out, lo and behold, there's no availability in the channel. Catastrophic for trying to pull off that job. Even worse, we've had examples of where customers are printing very large orders, maybe 400 banners that they have to print. And in the middle of the print job, suddenly there's inconsistency in the middle of the roll, defects in the middle of the roll, or batch-to-batch inconsistencies. These are the types of things that will kill your ability to enter into these new products with your customers, especially in the early stages of trying to make that transition. So one of the things that we supply with Validation Brand is our 100% money-back guarantee on all of our products, consistency, quality, and the ability to obtain that product in the channel. Often when you walk into a display graphic shop, this is what you'll see, just all sorts of medias that are standing around, pallets of media that have been partially used and then not being able to be used again. So one of the things that we like to talk about is also having a very select few grades that meet 90% of the needs when especially when you're just starting out. So this provides some focus on what you're selling, selling the things that you have in stock, and it also helps keep your costs down. Some other tips that we like to provide is to choose widths of your media that match fixtures you offer. So when we talk about finishing a little bit later in this session, we'll talk about some fixtures that are great display stands and things like that you can offer as products. And let's say, for example, you are supplying a roll-up banner stand. That roll-up banner stand maybe is 24 inches wide. You want to make sure that you're ordering 24-inch wide media so that it matches that width and it limits the amount of finishing that you have to do later in the process. What are some must-have grades that we recommend you have to start off? One of them is going to be an indoor display film. These are available as gloss and matte typically, and these are great as indoor signage. If you've ever been into a convenience store and they have signs all over the walls, 12-pack of beer on sale, what have you, those are typically done on an indoor display film, usually gloss, as I said, gloss or matte. So it's important to have that in your portfolio. Vinyl banner is a must-have to start off with. This allows you to do a nice hanging sign, both indoor or outdoor. With aqueous, if you go outdoor, there's only going to be a limited shelf life before the ink starts fading, so maybe 2 to 3 months. But it's easy to put grommets in, easy to hang, so it's a nice product offering to have as a vinyl banner. Matte coated offers a very inexpensive way to make some quick posters and signs that can be hung from walls or what have you. And then also you should investigate adhesive films. Those usually come in different tacks. So the tack levels will dictate the application you're using it for. So a low tack would be something that perhaps is being used as something that's repositionable, something you put up, you take down, you put up, you take down. Whereas if you go to a high tack, that's something that's more permanent. It's not intended to be removed once you place it wherever it is that it's going to be placed. What you want to consider is layout. So when it comes to production, when it comes to display graphic printing, there are different considerations when you're actually setting up jobs compared to when you're doing a proof. When you're doing a proof, often you're just doing a one-off, as I mentioned previously, and you don't need a lot of trimming or positioning or those types of things. When you do display graphic printing, there are layout considerations that need to be accounted for, such as, for example, as we mentioned, you may be doing multiple versions of the same print over and over again. So an option that you may want is something called step and repeat. This allows you to load a job once and basically say, well, I want 5 of these. This is different than copying, because with printing multiple copies, often you'll get a print, a cut, a print, a cut, a print, and a cut. With step and repeat, it's going to position multiple versions of the same job over and over again, maximizing the use of your media, reducing waste. Nesting is also another option that you may want. Nesting allows you to take many different jobs, put them all together onto one layout so that it, again, maximizes the amount of paper that you're using on your printer. Intelligent scaling is also a feature that is very helpful when you're doing display graphic printing. This is the ability to scale something up, but it's more intelligent than just a typical, blow it up 200%. Often intelligent scaling will use different algorithms, things such as fractals, where you're going to be able to scale it without losing a lot of quality or making an image blur. And then finally, and maybe most important, is finishing marks. So if you're going to be adding grommets, if you're going to be wrapping something around a frame for canvas, you need to add marks that are very specific to finishing, so that you know where to place the grommets consistently, you know where to make the folds, you know where to crop it, and do these types of things. Now, often these are features that are available in a RIP, and if you've been doing proofing on your aqueous inkjet printer, the odds are that you would have been using a RIP to do that. Luckily, many of the proofing RIPs have made the transition over to display graphic printing as well as a way to diversify their product offering. And so often with the RIPs that you have, you can purchase, usually for a small fee, or maybe it's already built in, some of these production options. A good example of this is the EFI RIP. So with the EFI RIP, here's an example of that. EFI is well known as a proofing RIP, but they also have something called a production option. You can pay a small fee, add the production option to your RIP, and this gives you the ability to do some of these things, such as add crop marks, add grommet marks, so on and so forth. If you don't have a RIP and you plan to print to your printer just through a print driver, you may be limited in what you can or can't do when it comes to these layout considerations, these layout options. Some of the printer drivers are better than others. This is an example of a Canon image prograph print driver. Canon actually does a better job than most, where they actually give you some additional plugins that you can load right into Photoshop that give you some layout features. But here's an example of the Canon driver in Photoshop. And you'll notice here I don't have any ability to do things like add crop marks, add grommet marks, and those types of things. So while it does give some benefit, there are some limitations to using a print driver when it comes to the layout features. Lastly, one of the things to consider with layout is that many of your customers, or it's very possible that if your customers are coming to you today with jobs such as business cards or brochures or traditional print jobs, and you are successful in converting them over to purchasing display graphic products from you, they may not be knowledgeable enough in preparing those files properly for large format printing if they've been supplying you with small format jobs in the past. So this is an opportunity and also a challenge. Realize that you may need to provide some new services around design in order to accommodate them making that transition from small format to large format. So if a customer comes in with a business card and you convince them, hey, you should really print a banner, you're going to have to help them understand that the file they gave you for the business card probably is not going to work for making a banner. They just can't, hand that off and expect a banner to be made. And so there's an opportunity to educate them, to add value to the relationship with the customer, or perhaps even offer a paid service of designing the work so that it will print in display graphics. The fourth step is finishing. And finishing is, again, as I mentioned earlier, probably the largest hurdle that has to be overcome in order to start producing display graphics using something like an aqueous inkjet printer that was previously used for proofing. If you haven't done anything before in display graphics printing, this is going to be the largest challenge for you. The first thing that you're going to need to consider is your environment. In proofing, you don't need a lot of table space. You don't need a lot of room with large format display graphic output. You do need a very large working space that's going to be very clean so that you can do things like finish. Some of the things that we do in finishing, such as trimming or maybe doing some folding of edges or actually preparing prints to go into various fixtures. One of the tricks to this is to simply take a lot of tables that you may have and simply cover them with a self-healing cutting mat. This is an example of that, where in this case, these are 3 4x8 tables that were laying around unused. Place them together to make a large space, purchased a fairly inexpensive self-healing cutting mat. This example here, I think this cutting mat was about a $200 cutting mat, and it allowed us to create a surface that we could use for prepping our jobs for finishing. Another thing to consider when it comes to finishing is adding the ability to put grommets into your prints. Adding grommets is a very inexpensive way to do some finishing. You can simply go to a hardware store if you wanted to. This set right here is a hand punch system. It's a manual system, and I think this was purchased at a Home Depot for about $15. It's not very automated. It does take some skill to place the grommets so that they look nice and have a nice finish on them, but it is an option. It's something for you that can get you started without a lot of capital expense. If you start off this way with doing manual grommets using the punch system, here you can upgrade to using a machine that places the grommets in a much more consistent and accurate way. But the nice thing about grommets is it allows you to do hanging banners. It allows you to take advantage of some fixtures that we'll talk about in a moment. They're known as X-stand fixtures. So grommets really give you an easy way to do some finishing without a lot of capital expense. Another trick or tip that we like to use is something called banner hem tape. So banner hem tape is a double-sided tape that's available. You can place it behind your grommets and then grommet through both the media and the hem tape to add strength and stability so that the grommet's not going to tear through the media when it's hung. Very important, especially if you're going to hang something outside. Another way the banner hem tape can be used is to fold the edge of a banner over. So we've seen, often you'll see this with vinyl signs or with a matte paper where you'll put the hem tape down, you'll fold the edge of the banner over, and it gives you a nice folded finished look as you fold it over onto the hem tape, which holds it in place. So that's another inexpensive way to add some finishing that gives you that final product that you give to your end user. Another thing that we like to recommend is adhesive foam core. So when printing with an aqueous inkjet printer, you cannot print to a rigid material. With adhesive foam core, basically what it is, it's foam core that has an adhesive layer and a protective covering on it. You pull back the protective covering, and then you can mount your media directly to the foam core to create a rigid product that you can sell as a freestanding sign. Maybe it's something that stands in an easel. In this case here, we've got a photo media mounted to the foam core, but you could easily mount matte media to it or the indoor display film as well. Another great option is to look at display hardware fixtures that are very easy to use and also do not require a lot of finishing prior to mounting in the hardware. So 2 examples that we'd like to kind of highlight are the X-stand, something called an X-stand, and something called a snap rail stand. So with the snap rail stand, what you basically have are 2 rigid metal rails that go top and bottom. In this case here, we printed a 24-inch banner. We didn't even print it full bleed. We just printed it as much as we could to the edges and left it that way. The top and the bottom fit into the rail snaps shut, and then it's mounted onto a pull system to give you a nice freestanding sign. Very professional looking. Another option is something called an X-stand. The X-stand you can see here, we're using grommets in the 4 corners. This is a scrim vinyl banner material. And the X-stand poles are made out of something similar to a tent pole would be. So it's a fiberglass flexible pole, and the hooks basically go through all 4 of the corners, and it makes the banner stand up in a very taut presentation. So it's nice and smooth, it's very light, it's easy to pick up and move around. One of the other benefits to this stand is that it collapses into something like a tent pole bag, so it's easy to store after you are done using it. So everything we've discussed up to this point in our steps have been about technically how do we actually make products. But it's also very important if we're going to make these products that we have to be able to sell them. So what are some tips and tricks that you can use to try and get into this horizontal market, like we said, trying to sell to customers you already have, but sell them new products and services that perhaps they don't purchase from you today? The first tip would be the sample sell, and many people would know this already. It might be self-evident, but it's especially important when it comes to display graphic products because that's their intent. They're intended to be on display. There's no better place to do that than in your own storefront. So if you do have a storefront, a counter, customers are coming in, place samples in your lobby. Let people see those products as they come in so they can visualize the products that you're offering. If you operate with a sales force, maybe you have both, or maybe you're just a sales force with a closed-door facility, place some images of the products in their hands, maybe some small samples of prints. Kind of hard to bring an entire banner with or a fixture that's going to show a freestanding display, but that's also something you can consider so that when your sales force is out talking to customers you already have, they can demonstrate some of the new offerings that you can bring to them. We focus a lot on cross-selling. What do we mean by that? Cross-selling can mean many different things to different people, but primarily what we're talking about here is reading what you're printing. So your customers are bringing you print jobs. Those print jobs are communication pieces. They're designed to tell your customer's audience something. If you pay attention to what it is they're printing, it gives you the opportunity to offer them other products. So perhaps a customer comes in and they're doing some brochures that they'd like to print or some flyers advertising the company picnic. That's a great opportunity to say, hey, how about a vinyl banner that could stand out in the lawn, when people are driving by so they know how to find the company picnic, as an example. How about a freestanding banner to put in the break room so that not only are these flyers advertising your company picnic, but now, when the employees come in for lunch, they see, hey, here's what's going on. So by reading what you're selling, you can, or what you're already printing today, you have that opportunity to give them ideas on how they can use the other products that you sell. Another thing to consider is that most of your customers today are likely buying display graphic products from somebody. And if they're not buying them from you, that means they're going to another vendor. But at the same time, realize that often your customers will have been buying traditional print from you longer than they've been buying display graphics printing from somebody else. So there's a reason they come to you. There's a reason they keep coming back to you. What are those reasons? What are the things that differentiate you from somebody else? Perhaps it's the fact that you offer a local delivery. Many sign shops don't offer delivery. They expect the customers to come back and pick them up. Perhaps that's something you can offer as a differentiator. So talk to your customers, find out why they come to you, and see, if you can apply those same values to the display graphic market. As we mentioned before when we were talking about layout, also consider graphic design services. So again, potentially an opportunity to offer services to your customer. Maybe they're doing small format printing with you today, and they may have no idea how to prepare a file for large format. We run into this all the time. It's an opportunity to either educate your customers, provide extra value, or offer that as a paid service for them to prep files. Those are the 5 steps. Those are all the tips and tricks that we have for you today on converting an aqueous inkjet proofing system into a production display graphic printer. A couple promotions that we are currently offering right now. We do have a service that's called our eColor Expert service. And if you purchase a roll of our validation display graphic media, you can call in to Finite Color and register that roll of media that you purchased. We will assign you a personal eColor expert that will walk you through the process of building profiles if you need to build profiles for your printer, talk to you about what fixtures to use, talk to you about finishing, and answer any questions you may have finishing. Basically just to get you up and running as you transition that proofing system over into display graphic production system, you would have a personal assistant that would kind of help you through that process. Also, we'd like to point out that we are actively blogging on finitecolor.com. You can look for the link to the Color Source blog. If you'd like to go there and sign up for our feed, you can pay attention to some of the things that we're posting. We like to post tips and tricks about color and printing, so we invite you to join the conversation there at finitecolor.com. And also just another web resource, signindustry.com is another online magazine that services the sign industry, and there are a number of great articles that are available at that website to help educate you. So we'd like to thank you for attending our webinar today. During our live webinars, we always like to offer lots of polls, and we also open everything up to a question and answer session. So if anyone would like to ask questions, they have the ability to do that through our Q&A panel over on the right-hand side of the screen, and we will take those questions as they come in. Tune back into finitecolor.com to find more webinars on display graphic printing, color, and media.